I'm Dan Drake. This is Front Up on Geno TV and Channel 99. I'd like to welcome our guest today, who's Jeff Carlson.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
You're welcome, and thank you for coming. Jeff is the manager of the Department of Natural Resources of the town of Nantucket.
Yes.
A newly formed department, and you've been going around telling your story a little bit to the Board of Selectmen and other groups. But
we'll tell it to anyone who listens.
Why don't you just very briefly summarize what the mission of the department is
Sure. I guess the Natural Resources Department, kind of our goal and kind of our directive going forward is it was kind of the town's attempt to encapsulate all of our natural resource programs like the Conservation Commission, water quality, shellfish biology, kind of all under one roof. Even our shellfish enforcement. So it's myself, Tara Riley, the shellfish biologist, who's I know has been on this couch before,
right.
And our shellfish warden,
Don't
J.C. Johnson. No, but she's been here many times. She's much more popular than me. But she's come in, and it's the three of us that have been kind of given a blank slate to do whatever we think fits. So we thought the best idea first was to kind of flesh out what our programs were and what we were doing, and then go around to groups like the Shellfish Association, to the Conservation Foundation, to the Civic League, to really anyone who will listen to what we're trying to do and where we're going, to just kind of get some feedback and say, hey, what is the public expecting us to do? What do they expect from the department? What should we be doing more of? What should we be doing less of? Where should we focus our energies? Because we're limited in resources and personnel right now. So we've really just been trying to get our message out as most as possible, and we've I think we've been pretty successful so far in communicating with as many people that will have us. And again, we're always willing. Anyone who watches this show that has any thoughts on what we should do, please call or visit us down at the Jetties tennis courts, and we'll definitely hear what everyone has to say. So that's our hopes, and we're trying to do a lot more in regards to just outreach and education for people. We feel that's something that, especially with natural resources, that hasn't been lacking, but hasn't been as available as it should have been before. So I think we're trying to increase that as much as possible.
I guess we had better tell people, though, that they shouldn't come down to your office for their shellfish permits.
No, shellfish permits are available if you want to purchase those at the police station. We're trying to also, with the town doing its reconsolidation a bit, put all of your permits, so when you want to go pay, it's all in one place. So you're not going from the Marine Department to the police station to the fire department to wherever you need to go to get a permit. Is you can use cash, check, or credit card, go into the police station, say I want to pay for my recreational shellfish button, my beach driving sticker, my mooring permit, whatever else you can get while you're there. You can pay one time, so you're not paying a million times, and do it all at one time
stop.
With set hours and more hours than we can provide at some of those other places. So we're trying to make it more convenient for everyone as well. That's the hope.
Let's talk a little bit about your role with the Conservation Commission and what the Conservation Commission is sort of focusing on these days.
Sure.
And it has a very specified role, but clearly it gets into issues beyond the specifics.
Right. So the Conservation Commission is primarily charged with the administration of both the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and then our local wetlands bylaw that we have through the town. And they most people are probably familiar with the permitting process that they do, where they can come and file their application and go through that for any work or any alteration within 100 feet of a wetland of any kind. So dunes, banks, beaches, vegetated wetlands, bogs, you name it, you want to do work within 100 feet.
So the ocean is as much a wetland as this.
Correct.
The swamp. Yeah.
Exactly. So they're all treated, and they have different performance standards and different interests that go with. Just as an easy example, a vegetated wetland for us, kind of on the inland of the island, is one of our natural protections to our aquifer and to groundwater. So that is one of the things that those wetlands help protect. Where if you look at a coastal beach isn't protecting that aquifer as much. So it doesn't protect that, but it may protect an additional interest like erosion control, where the vegetated wetland may not. So the Conservation Commission is tasked with these applications that come in, and they review each application against the standards for each particular resource area. And then there are things that, no structure within 50 feet is an example, so they can look at the plan and say, okay, the structure is outside of 50 feet, so that's okay.
Does an L box count?
Outbox won't count. We definitely encourage things like outboxes and those things. Osprey poles, outboxes, bird houses, those kinds of things are definitely that's kind of a normal yard activity, I would call it. So my role with the board is I'm not actually sitting on the board. I'm just the administrator of it. So I joke with them that I'm there to keep them out of trouble and to be sure that they're consistent and following the procedure that's outlined for them to follow. So we have our meetings. We actually have one today where they'll go, people present, they can ask questions and have an exchange of information. Sometimes they'll come to me for how we've been interpreting things before, how we review it, and then we have that discussion in public, and then they make decisions and they can issue permits for work or certainly can work on revising projects. Some go more than one meeting. Some of our erosion control projects will go 3 or 4 depending on what people are looking to do or what impacts are there, or if we feel there's more information that's needed to make the best decision possible. We can certainly ask for that, and then people who apply can certainly try to provide that additional information.
Erosion control is a hot topic these
Yes, sir.
days, and we heard a presentation from a specialist on the subject last week, I guess it was, at the Athenaeum, and put on by the Civic League, and he did a very good job of sort of outlining the issues. Presumably, the Conservation Commission is pretty much reactive rather than proactive in the sense that they respond to projects that people want to do.
Exactly.
Is there an opportunity for them to be proactive as well in this arena?
Yes and no. I guess the easy answer to that is to say that they're definitely reactive in the sense that the board in and of itself is permit driven, so it's application driven. So until they see a new design for some way to do erosion control or shoreline protection or beach nourishment, they don't really design policy to do that. I think the arm that we're seeing that in now is the town is working on developing its coastal management plan. And there are members from the Conservation Commission. As a matter of fact, Dr. Sarah Akhtai, who's on the Conservation Commission, is the chair of this group. And that's a group that's been kind of tasked to look at coastal issues, erosion, coastal hazards, infrastructure needs on the coast, or infrastructure that we're trying to protect on the coast as it relates to town property. And I think the hopes of that document when it's done is to essentially be a guideline for people to look at and say, this is how the town is planning to manage their land and their infrastructure. So how we're going to protect our roads, how we're going to protect our sewage treatment facility, how we're going to protect, our airport is a major piece of public infrastructure that's right up against the, it's actively eroding in a couple spots. So how the town is going to do that, and hopefully that'll be a template for people to say, the town has looked at some of these options. They're appropriate for where we are, because not all options are appropriate for the North Shore, the South Shore, the East Coast, for where things are appropriate. So I think some of that will come out through the vetting through there. I think the people that apply through the CONCOM do a really good job of also looking at projects that have been successful and not successful, and the Conservation Commission itself has been very active as far as starting to require some pretty aggressive monitoring of systems that get put in, because the decisions they make are only as good as the information that we have. So if people go out and are doing a great deal of shoreline monitoring as far as erosion rates up and down the coast, not just the bank, but what's happening to the shape and form of the beach. Is it narrowing? Is it getting wider? Is it steeper? And how the water is coming up on those. And the more information we can gather and then see how some of the systems we're trying relate to those, we can make better decisions. So I guess we're proactive in the sense that we're asking for a lot of information to come in. I know projects that we've permitted, we require sometimes at a minimum quarterly reports that show complete monitoring for a quarter mile in each direction, and then the project area of what exactly is the beach, the bank, and the dune doing. What does it look like? What's the quality of the vegetation? Just to see what the impacts are. So we don't want to obviously move an impact from right in front to 100 yards down the beach to somewhere else. It's not. Are
there some projects that have been done without being permitted recently?
Not recently. I guess the most famous ones we had were on the front page of the paper around last Christmas, where we had essentially 2 retaining walls that were constructed on the North Shore. The CONCOM issued enforcement actions on that, and those structures were removed. And post that other things have either been permitted there or restoration work has been permitted to repair that bank or dune. So
most of it that was repaired last year got carried away.
most of it is gone. That's kind of the unfortunate nature of it, is you see that happen a lot.
I mean, there's some people who the theory is you can't stop it.
Well, I personally tend to subscribe to the thought that you can delay, but you'll never stop. And I think the interesting thing that when Mr. O'Connell presented at the Coastal Erosion Forum is, regardless of whatever you put there, whether it's a 2-foot thick concrete wall or something, you're just delaying it to a certain degree, and you're delaying it at a cost of something else, perhaps. I know when we looked at a lot of those hardened structures that a lot of the beach goes away because you're taking away the sediment source from the beach. So you're delaying it at a cost, and I think that the hard part, and the thing that the commission has a hard time with, is you have to find the balance between the impacts and then the public interest or the public needs. So it's kind of the juggling.
Now, there's a rule, is there not, that you can't do anything to protect a house that was been built since what, 1970?
1978. That's the enactment of the local wetlands bylaw. And there are some ways to deal with that. Obviously, if it was a significant piece of public infrastructure, so if the sewer beds were built past there and they needed protection, they could obviously apply for a waiver.
Right.
If you built your house, we don't have as much flexibility both through the state.
What if you moved your house? Did that count as a new house, or is it the old house?
No, it can get kind of tricky. We definitely encourage people to look at retreat as a first option, to move back. Obviously, at some point, you run out of moving back.
Right.
And we've seen a lot of structures where it started as simple snow fence that we used to see put up and hear the stories of snow fence and Christmas trees, and those things went on for years, and then it evolves to we see a lot of sand drift fencing now, which is kind of a more permanent fencing that's on kind of a driven pile and a constructed fence with sand. And we slowly see builds where people try different things and they kind of ramp up over time, but a lot of those folks are also we just had one on Neil Point again that permitted to put in that fence, try to construct the dune to help maintain it with plantings, but then they also said, we have room on our lot to take our house from 30 feet away from the top to move it to 130 feet away from the top. We want to do that as well. So they put some protection out to hopefully slow it down a little bit, give them some more time, move the house back, which buys them a little bit more time, and then the technologies on these things are moving pretty quickly for what people have been willing to try. So I think that there's, really some thought if you can buy yourself more time by moving back, by the time you get in a situation again, there may be something new that's better than what we have now. So
I think one of the questions that people ask is does the town have a policy about erosion control? And you say there is a policy that's sort of demonstrated through the permitting process that the Concom has. You also have this coastal management plan that's going on,
correct,
which is developing. But where does the property owner or the prospective property buyer look for guidance as to whether he's going to have to invest a whole lot of money in protecting this property, like the person I mentioned earlier out in Tom Nevers, or should sell it sooner rather than later, or maybe there was a proposal a few years ago to put a bunch of subway cars along the South Shore. And why
I hear a lot of those.
Yeah.
So, and it's kind of interesting because it's kind of to each their own as far as individual properties go. And again, the town piece, that coastal management plan really pertains to town-owned land. I would say on a whole, once that's developed, I'll never think the town will have a complete just policy on erosion control, because I think one of the really great things about the way the permitting system works with the Concom is it allows people to do what they feel is reasonable both for them financially and environmentally, and try to permit that through. A lot of the, not even say solutions, a lot of the alternatives that we've seen have come up over time just from trial and error from projects that have worked or that haven't worked. So I think we'll continue to see that, and I think that's, to me, makes sense, for that's how that would be. So as it goes, and there's a lot of new resources that have just come online. I know the Massachusetts Coastal Zone Management has a really great interactive mapping tool that they run off of their website, where you can look, and they've done transects around the entire island that I want to say are 20 meters apart, and it shows kind of the erosion history on those transects from The earliest one they have is 1844, and it runs kind of through current, and there's different sets through there, and you can see where the shoreline maps through over time. You can pick a specific transect and see kind of the ebb and flow that's there for the long term, and then both the long term and the short term. I mean, we have some very interesting cases where if you look at Codfish Park shows on their 150-year trend as a beach that's accreting, not a beach that's eroding. But for those who have been here longer than me know that there used to be another 2 or 3 rows of houses that were there that have clearly left from erosion through a shorter time window. So over that 150 years, it may be accreting in half a feet, but in the last 30 years, it's been eroding. So it's definitely very cyclical in nature and how it works, and it's not always the most predictable, but you can look at that and interpret and say, well, the trend over time has been this for a very long term, and the trend over time in the short term is this. So what management can we take to help shorten the short-term erosion trend and get back to our long-term trend? What can we do? Or has Codfish Park started to build back out again just from other natural means? So that's...
And of course, the unpredictable part of it is what's happening in the bottom of the ocean that changes the currents and the waves. And
so, I mean, definitely the shoaling around the island is very mobile. I think you can get any fisherman around here to tell you how busy they are and how much they move, and they definitely have a huge impact on what's happening on the beach. So
erosion is a continuing story.
Always. And it will be forever, as long as you and I are here, and probably well beyond you and I being here.
I'm sure well beyond.
So I'm sure we'll be dealing with erosion for a very long time to come.
Jeff, thanks very much for coming by today. And Jeff Carlson, the manager of the Department of Natural Resources of the town of Nantucket.
Thanks for having me, Dan.